Good morning. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How have you guys been doing? Did you miss me? Because I've been thinking about you and missing you. If you guys don't know it already, this time of year in the fall, I am extremely busy. I volunteer in the fall. I volunteer all year round, but this time of year, I help run an educational program. So I'm pretty busy. And then I am a big fan of Halloween. So every year we have a huge hunt or display, and I'm fairly busy helping put those animatronics together, designing it. In the past, I have created a lot of animatronics. I honestly just don't have the time to do that right now. But we still put a lot of effort in. Sometimes we go out onto the community and we will take those animatronics to schools and other places. Um, we allow the kids to really enjoy the animatronics, take pictures. We provide snacks and candy, and we give out Halloween bags. And then the actual Halloween day is extremely busy. I probably need at least 1 or 2 weeks off, which I generally don't take. So I'm extremely busy in mid uh, October through the beginning of November, just reconciling all of the Halloween activity. So I apologize that I haven't been here in a few days. It's just that I'm just extremely busy on top of everything else that I have to do and all my other commitments. So um, I'm getting closer to getting Halloween behind me, and I should be more regularly back. I haven't forgot about the Dahmer childhood trauma, childhood behavior video. I'm going to do that. It's just I have to take time to get all of the clips ready and go over which video I'm going to go over and then clip them all out so they can be prepared when I discuss his behavior. So all of that takes time. And I kind of wanted to come on today because there's some activity in the Idaho 4 murder case. And of course, we all know what's been going on from the hearing that was at the end of October. I think it was October 25th, right? So in that hearing, there was like a full day of court, right? Because there was a private hearing where we already knew they were not going to detail that motion to dismiss the indictment hearing, what was discussed, right? Because those things may never be presented if this case actually goes to trial. And again, I've already expressed clearly, I do not feel that this is the right time. If a case was to go forward with Bryan Kohberger as the suspect, I feel that there are way too many issues. There is so many areas where there is reasonable doubt. Um, I'm not gonna go over them right now. I mean, you can check out some of my prior videos where I kind of go into detail and just express some of my opinion, and also I just talk about the evidence or the lack of evidence or all of the things that do not make sense, that do not fit. The main number one thing is the lack of defensive wounds. I held that back almost a year, not wanting to really discuss that because I was really anticipating this going to trial October 2nd, even though I knew just from my experience, neither side was ready. They were not prepared. They're still fighting over the evidence. Still, at this time, we're still talking about the DNA evidence, right? The DNA evidence that allegedly is on this alleged sheath, right? So, is that sheath on video camera being found? How many DNA profiles were found on the sheath? I am hearing that there's more than one now. Was there only one? Why isn't these reports already completed? We're almost a year into this case, and reports that allegedly were given by the FBI to law enforcement, to prosecutors, to even identify Mr. Kohberger as a suspect are not complete at this time. And now there's additional waiting, additional time, additional um, needed reports, time for these reports to be turned over. Why? Why is this not done? If this was something that was done in December of 2022, we're in November of 2023, and these reports have not been completed. And this is the FBI, right? So if this information was provided from the FBI to law enforcement and given the name Bryan Kohberger, why are these records not already complete? Why, if this DNA work was done almost a year ago, why has this not been provided to the defense as exculpatory evidence if it's deemed that, right? If this is accurate, if everything was done above board with the proper techniques, with the proper guidelines, only using labs that were properly set up and identified to be used, why is this evidence not already turned over? We're almost a year since Mr. Kohberger has been arrested. There is something not right going on. They have given the prosecution additional time. Now the date is set for December 1st to provide this evidence that was provided to the prosecutor back in December of 2022. This does not make sense. Were there other labs used? Were there outside labs used? Was there something inappropriate done? Was there a chain of custody issue? We need to know, right? We need to know what has happened, what's going on, and rightfully so. Again, Mr. Kohberger has certain rights. Due process, he has a right to have the evidence that was used to identify him, to pick him as a suspect, his name being used. This is really a non-issue. So what is happening behind the scenes? What is the prosecutor doing? What information was the prosecutor going by? Was it the information that the FBI provided, or was there a different lab? Why is this not clear? Why is there so much secrecy in what was done? If it was done above board, proper protocol, this information should have been provided months and months ago. And again, they have fought tooth and nail. The prosecutor has gone as far as saying they're not even using this evidence. But was this evidence used during the grand jury process? We don't know. That's a great question, right? Was this evidence used at the grand jury process, which received an indictment of Mr. Kohberger? And now, as this is going forward, and there's been a review of what happened in that grand jury process, now the prosecutor is saying we're not going to use this evidence. But was it used? Was it used during the grand jury process where the indictment was received? Great question, right? We still don't have an answer to that. So I'm not even here to kind of go over any of that information. I really just want to put two things on this video today, or in this video today. And one is the grand jury motion to have the grand jury indictment dismissed. That was denied by the judge. So we're going to go over that quickly. And then we're going to move on to talk about this IGG, this DNA evidence material, that now the judge is now saying, no, you don't have to turn it all over to the defense. No, give it to me. I'm going to review what you have done, and then I will decide what the defense receives. I am so happy, so recognizing that the defense for Bryan Kohberger is putting everything on the record, because these are all grounds. If he is convicted, which I don't even see how any set jury would convict him with all of this leakage, this misinformation, all of these details, I don't even know how he will get a fair representation in a jury box, but also considering all of the evidence that is known, that is factual, how a group of 9 or 12 will convict with the information that's known out. So, anyway, we're going to go over why the judge denied the motion to dismiss. He's basically saying there's been no error, but I will read that and then we're going to move on and talk about what he's saying now with this IGG DNA material evidence. Um, he wants to review it first. He doesn't feel that everything needs to be known to the defense. Again, why not? Why not? What have they done? What are they doing? What have they done to get to that name? If everything you did was documented, there was a proper chain of custody, this evidence was found, collected properly, processed properly, identified this person, which did he have a criminal record? Was his DNA in someone's database? If they built a profile with his family, who had the record? How did they get their DNA? Did their family have the record? Did the father have a criminal record? How? Right? Why is this not clear? Why is there so much protection? We have to wonder what has gone on. What kind of chain of custody? What kind of record? Was this the FBI? Or did they use a different lab? Did they use their own state lab? Was it something local? At the end of the day, there should be documents, there should be reports, there should be witnesses that can attest to what was done, that chain of custody, how the evidence was collected. There should be photographs, video, pictures. Why is this so difficult? What have they done? And why is there such a cover up? Okay, let's just get to it. Okay, so the first article is on the Hidden Horror Facebook page. It's coming from CNN, always a reputable quality source. I'm not going to bring anything that is not reputable. I'm going to be able to show where my information, where my facts come from. And in life, in this type of work, you cannot just make allegations. Something could be true. Something could be very true, but it is not that it is true. It is what you can demonstrate, what you can show, what you can prove. You don't get to make up what has happened. You have to prove it. You have to show it. You have to have evidence. You have to have witnesses. You have to have video, pictures, documentation, records. Where is the chain of custody? When the FBI received this evidence, where is the chain of custody? How was it processed? What labs did they use? How did they come to the name Bryan Kohberger? Was it the building of this family tree? And how was that done? What labs, what source was used? Because if you say it is the father's DNA, how did they have the father's DNA? What database was used where his father's DNA would be in that database? Was he a federal employee? Was he a state employee? Was he a city employee? Did he have a criminal past? How would they have his father's DNA? Allegedly. I'm going to say allegedly because I don't know. No one knows how the process went. This is a fair question. And even still, Was there multiple children? Does Bryan Kohberger have a brother? I know he has a sister. How was that linked to him? If they found the father's DNA, for example, and if I was Bryan Kohberger's father, I would want to know, how do you have my DNA? What records do you have on me to have my DNA on file in a database? Did he provide his DNA? Not a fingerprint, right? That's totally different. DNA. How? Where? And if it wasn't the FBI allegedly, was it a state lab? Was it a private lab? Was there a company? There are several companies that are known to hold DNA profiles because of their business ventures. They may be trying to link family members. They may be trying to find someone's sibling or parent, for example. What was used? What was the path taken? And what was done? And was it done the proper way to get to that name? Because if you identify allegedly Bryan Kohberger's father, you would have to build a family tree. His parents, his siblings, any nephews, nieces, any children that he had, right? So again, if you built that out, and they're not even in the state of Idaho, they live in another state, a different state, pretty much across country, you have to be using some database that's going to cover multiple states. So was it the FBI? Was it a state lab? Would the state have access to another state's information? Or was there a private company that does and nothing but DNA, right? So these are all questions. They're valid questions. But even still, if this is true that allegedly there was a sheaf and allegedly this DNA, which they describe and tag as touched DNA, was on the sheaf, let's move forward, right? If this was all properly done, all of this information evidence, how this was done, how they identified Mr. Kohberger, should have easily been provided to the defense. But it hasn't. And now the judge is saying he's going to mediate this, review all of this information, and make a decision on what is provided to the defense. So, again, great grounds for a future appeal if this is necessary. But I have said, and I'm putting on the record again today, I believe that as things have gone forward, the prosecution, the way the information that has leaked out, and also known information, with so much reasonable doubt, honestly, you really need only one person that does not agree, that does not want to convict. But I don't think you can even get a majority. With no defensive wounds, I don't see it. I do not know if Mr. Kohberger is the assailant or if there's additional assailants. But my common sense is never going to allow me to convict someone that does not even have a scratch. And you want me to believe, I apologize for this digression, but you want someone to believe four healthy, youthful people that would have been stabbed multiple times in an attack, a physical attack with a knife allegedly as the weapon. This is a close up attack. This is close proximity for a stabbing where the victim is going to do things like fight back, scratch, kick, scream, cry, yell, try to take that knife, allegedly, if it was a knife. I did a whole video on defensive wounds. I tried to educate the public on what happens when there is a knife attack. It is very brutal. One would have gaping cuts, wounds, bleeding out profusely, quickly. Allegedly, one of the victims allegedly had 52 stab wounds. I know it's very hard to imagine the level of violence that was exacted on these four people. And we want answers. And we want to know who did this to them and why. Why did this happen to them? How did this happen to them? Why them? Why such a brutal, why such a brutal attack? From the beginning, when all of us were sitting at home or we were out and we saw that news broadcast, if you were like me, you saw the blood running down the ceiling on the walls. You saw the blood on the concrete on the outside of the house. This was a very vicious, violent, a level of brutality that is not seen that often. Because it was a sharp instrument, likely a knife. I don't know because I don't have the autopsy, right? I don't have a way to look at those wounds. I feel that they need to compare wounds with one victim to another victim to see if there was more than one weapon and possibly more than one knife. Or they're the same size, or the same deepness, the same thickness. Because when you're attacking someone with a knife, it is a close up. It cannot be 3, 4 feet away. You have to be close up in a stabbing. This was someone that was very strong, that was able to possibly hold a victim down and at the same time prevent them from knocking the knife out of the hand, taking the knife, and also doing the stabbing. There would have been screams, there would have been a struggle. And I believe in Ethan's case, there would have been a battle because he was an athlete, he was strong, he was healthy, he was very tall. And potentially, maybe there was more than one assailant. Because from day one of Mr. Kohberger's arrest, I've said this before, and I did not want to do that video, but I had to be very honest. Because in my hopes, maybe the prosecutor would feel differently and go with the dismissal. Let this charge right now be dismissed. And if you can gain more knowledge, more evidence to place Mr. Kohberger there with that knife and possibly other assailants, then I can see you bringing these charges. But he doesn't have a scratch on him, not an abrasion, not a cut on his face, on his neck, on his arms, on his chest. That's where we would look to see those types of wounds in an attack with a knife. And they're not there. In the prosecution, they must address the likelihood that one person, or Mr. Kohberger specifically, did this vicious, horrific stabbing or stabbings to each victim with two people in each room. And there are no cuts, abrasions, wounds, scratches. What was under the victim's fingernails? Was those clippings? Were they sent off to see if there was DNA? If I am hearing that two of the victims fought back, if two of the victims fought back against the attacker, you're going to have defensive wounds. You're going to have defensive wounds on those victims. So you would try to find a suspect. And when you find them, you're going to photograph their body. You're going to look at their hands for scratches and cuts. Sometimes during a stabbing, blood can be very slippery, can make that knife very, very slippery. And the assailant will actually cut him or herself in the attack. And with four victims, with the level of brutality, was there more than one weapon? Was that blade able to sustain and not bend or break as it's cutting the skin, piercing bones, cracking bones? The level of energy, not just to unalive four victims, but one victim allegedly receiving 52 stab wounds. That is rage. That is anger. That is vengeance. Was all the DNA, was samples taken? Did the killer or killers leave DNA behind from the struggle? Was they scratched? Did they receive cuts? Was Ethan able to fight back and possibly hit the killer or killers? This DNA, it is so hard to process and kind of think about it in a way that there was not more DNA, more physical evidence left behind. Was there a time in this case where there was a cleanup? when I think about this case, I always go back to something that has always just bothered me. And that is at 2:52 a.m. there was no more activity on Kaylee and Maddie's cell phones, and they were on the third floor of the house. And I always felt that the murder started with them. It started on the third floor with Kaylee and Maddie when their cell phones both abruptly stopped. It stopped. And I would like to know, what was the phone calls about? Was there a voicemail? Were there text messages to that person? Because there was constant calls made to one person. What was that about? I want I want to make sure that if the prosecution proceeds with Bryan Kohberger, I want them to have answers. If Bryan Kohberger is allegedly driving in his vehicle with a picture of him doing this at 2:53 a.m. and Kaylee and Maddie's, all of their cell phone activity abruptly ends at 2:52 a.m. Was the murders already started? And they cannot place Mr. Kohberger at 1122 King Road because they have him on video, on camera, in his vehicle, allegedly at 2:53 a.m. And is this why the time of the murders were changed? Allegedly, it was going to be the 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. That was the initial reports of the time of the alleged murders, the murder time. Then it was changed about 4 o'clock. And then as we found out about the DoorDash, or I don't want to say DoorDash, I apologize, the food delivery. So I don't want to put any companies or any names out there, erroneously or just out there, period. The time changed, right? And it's not just that the time changed, there was a food delivery. And my question, and again, I'm going to refer back to the medical examiner's report, the autopsy, was there contents of food being eaten by either Zana and or Ethan? We need we need to know, we need to think about a lot of information that's not being told. And it'll come out if this goes to trial. If that order of food, as I saw it in the kitchen, was set in the kitchen, were there any contents of food in either of their stomachs? There's a lot of questions. And right now we don't have answers. But my concern is if the prosecution continues to move forward in a trial, will all of these things be addressed adequately? And this is not even highlighting something that we all know, but none of us really want to talk about, right? We don't want to talk about allegedly the roommate on the second floor, right? Seeing the possible suspect slash killer and that person walking past them. Does not make any sense, right? No one wants to talk about it. It doesn't make sense. Even the written language, ironclad and black. Many people don't talk like that. And I'm much older than them, and I would never talk like that. That's law enforcement. And even the comment about I am here to help you just doesn't hit with me. That's emergency police. That's aid, right? People coming to help you. Why would a suspect say something like that? That doesn't make any sense. But I'm not here to kind of go over all of that. I'm here to discuss two things: to highlight that the motion to dismiss the indictment was denied, and then to just go over the IGG um, finding or order that says they have now until December 1st more time to provide this information to the judge. People, I have warned you how far out this trial could be, right? Next year, right? With this still going on, it won't be in February. This trial won't start in February. We won't be able to process all of this evidence that fast and even have experts prepared and ready to testify. So it's going to be some more time. Um, Also, want to say before I get started, we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of the murders. I am going to put a memorial video together, just highlighting um, Katie, Maddie, and it's just going to be maybe some soft music and pictures. Um, my hope is that there's some law enforcement still behind the scenes, still considering the evidence, the totality, the scene, the tips that were given, and all of the known information that's been released. Some of what the college students said, um, some of the Snapchat and things like that. I hope all of that is being looked into for a potential suspect or suspects behind the scenes, because I don't want to get to a point where we have a case like a John Benet Ramsey case or a Maddie McCain case where we just don't ever solve who did this. Those students, they deserve justice. Their families deserve justice. They deserve to know. And I know I brought cases myself where justice has been delayed. many, many years. And in some cases, justice has been denied. I recently did an update, and justice was denied for that young man in Georgia. I believe his name is Kendrick Johnson, for his family. All of the things that they have gone through, 10 years, and still no idea, no justice. What happened? I don't want this to be a case for these four students. So I just implore anybody that's out there that has any evidence, information. It seems that everybody knows what happened but law enforcement. From listening, so if you know something, come forward. Let this not be a case that is unsolved. Excuse me. Okay. So let's go over the CNN article. It's dated October 26, 2023. The writers are Veronica Miracle and Jeffrey Kopp, and the title of the article is Judge in Case of Idaho Student Killings. Suspect Bryan Kohberger denies one of two motions to dismiss grand jury indictment. A district court judge in Idaho has denied a request to dismiss a grand jury indictment in the case of Bryan Kohberger, the man accused of fatally stabbing four University of Idaho students. During a public hearing Thursday, the defense argued there was an error in the grand jury instructions and that the grand jury was misled as to the standard of proof required for an indictment. Kohberger faces four counts of first-degree murder in connection with the November 13th deaths of 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Morgan and 20-year-olds Zaina Cornado and Ethan Chapin, who were fatally stabbed in their off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho. A not guilty plea has been entered on his behalf. The Idaho State Constitution, Kohberger's defense attorneys argued, sets the standard of proof for a grand jury beyond a reasonable doubt, but the grand jury in the case against Kohberger was given the lower standard required for an archaic process called a presentment, which requires a preliminary hearing. As a result, failing to properly instruct the grand jury is grounds for dismissal of the indictment, the defense said. A Latah County District Court Judge John Judge denied the motion, saying, I am constrained by what I believe is settled law in Idaho. This is certainly an issue that you would have to bring with a higher court like the Idaho Supreme Court. I think the argument is good, but I can't go that far, not today, Judge continued, adding he would issue a written decision at a later time. The open hearing was the second held Thursday and both addressed different motions to dismiss Kohberger's indictment. The first closed hearing was a dismissal request by the defense based on a biased jury. The judge's decision from that hearing hasn't yet been released. The killings and lengthy investigation rattled the community of Moscow, a city of 25,000 people that hadn't recorded a murder since 2015. After weeks with little information and heightened anxieties, Kohberger, a graduate student from nearby Washington State University, was arrested at his parents' house in Pennsylvania. Okay. So That's just kind of going forward and just repeating what I briefly said. Um, the judge denied the motion on the grounds that um, the the standard that they used was appropriate, and if they disagree, they can then appeal it to the Supreme Court, to the Idaho Supreme Court. Let me find that for a minute. So again, I would have preferred that the prosecutor dismissed the indictment and did not move forward. There must be some substantial evidence. However, I still do not feel that you can overcome. This is a fact that Mr. Kohberger does not have any defensive wounds. If it is true and accurate that the allegation that he unalived 4 victims with a knife, he would have some defensive wounds. And that is not the case. And that is why I will always stand on the idea that if this case proceeds, there will be a not guilty verdict. Coupled with a lawsuit for prosecutorial misconduct due to what has happened to him in this instance. Um, with the knowledge that we all know that have a law enforcement background, that is something that we would see. Um, I definitely want to find the killer or killers. I would hope that there is still some investigation going on in that endeavor. I do not feel that there is sufficient evidence against Mr. Kohberger. I do not feel that. And I think that is part of why the prosecutor is fighting so hard not to provide the background details of what happened in processing this sheath, this knife sheath with the alleged touch DNA. It's just something not right about it from the beginning. Okay, let's go over our second article. Now, in this article, I want to read part of the order because I'm going to read the introduction and the conclusion only of the order. The order is about, I think it's 32 pages long, and there's a lot of background information in there, and then some cases, some case law cited. So I'm not going to read that. You can read that. There will be within this article a link to the order, and if you tap on the link to the order, it will open up the entire order. You can print it and read it as you deem necessary. But I'm not going to read that entire order. What I will do is read the article first, and then I will highlight the introduction and the conclusion only. Okay. So this article is by Crim 2. It's dated November the 2nd. The author is Shannon Maui, and it's titled Deadline Set for Prosecutors to Turn Over Evidence Against Bryan Kohberger in Moscow Murder Case. So, again, as I told you about 2 or 3 months ago, they're still fighting for evidence. How could this trial start October 2nd when the prosecutor is unwilling to share evidence with the defense. It was just no way, right? No. You have to think about that. You have to think about the why. You have to consider the why in this instance. So let's get at this. Judge John Judge wants all material from the FBI and genetic lab turned over to him by December the 1st. So again, that's giving them additional 5 weeks. I don't know why they need it. They should already have records. Um, but let's continue. In what could be called a win for the defense of the man accused of murdering four University of Idaho students last year, Latah County Judge John Judge says the state must turn over all investigative genetic genealogy, abbreviated IGG, material by December the 1st. Obviously, I'm asking to look at all this because I can't make informed decisions if I don't, Judge said during a status conference Thursday morning. The judge wants to review all the IGG material from the FBI and Othram labs in camera or privately to determine what to turn over to Bryan Kohberger's defense team. In an October 25th order, so right there, you just click that and it will take you to the order, okay? The judge ruled the defense team showed at least some of that material is essential to building a case. In that order, the judge cited prosecution filings about how the FBI used investigative genetic genealogy to find a lead into who left DNA on a knife sheath at the crime scene. The FBI uploaded that DNA profile onto public genetic databases according to the filing, then built a family tree of related people. The order shows the FBI also used social media, birth and death certificates, and other public information to build the family tree of people related to the unknown suspect profile. Let's pause right here. It says the FBI uploaded that DNA profile onto public genetic databases. Was that proper procedure, protocol, and guidelines? Were they allowed to use public genetic databases? Is there a requirement that they use specific databases that are for law enforcement purposes? Because if this is stepping outside of requirements, guidelines, are they restricted to do that? Because how would the FBI have this person's DNA in a database if they're not a criminal, they're not a federal, state, or city worker that may have been required to provide their DNA, their fingerprints? How would they have access to that? It may appear that they wouldn't, that they're not going to have everybody's DNA, and that maybe this is why a step was taken to use public genetic databases. But is that legal? Is that proper procedure? What is restricted? Is this restricted? What are the guidelines? What are the rules? Because when you have a public genetic database, people have to provide their consent to allow law enforcement to use their DNA profile to do such a thing as build a family tree because that's not their intention. If you use a public service and pay money to have your DNA taken, for example, a DNA test, for example, if you want to find your parents, if you want to find if you have a sibling, if you want to know maybe some genetic disorders, you may want to give your DNA medically. So, has what the FBI done is that the proper procedure? Because all of these public databases where people are paying for services, are they giving consent for their DNA profile to then be used for law enforcement purposes? Because I believe most people would not be aware that their DNA can later be used for law enforcement purposes, and they would have to provide consent. So, is there a lawsuit there? Again, Bryan Kohberger's father, family members, do you have a lawsuit potentially? If your DNA was used inappropriately, violating your rights to privacy, if you did not consent, if you did not give your consent, was your DNA taken illegally? This is why I said before in a different video, I see a multi-million dollar lawsuit for what has happened to Bryan Kohberger and also his family. There may be multiple family members who have had their DNA used to build this family tree. Did you give your consent for law enforcement to use your DNA in this matter? Did you sign something legally that allowed your DNA to be used in this manner? Not for what you paid for a service, a DNA match. Maybe you want to know if this child is yours. Maybe you had to give your DNA for a job. Maybe you were looking for a parent, a sibling. I don't know. But did you sign something that would give law enforcement the ability to obtain your DNA legally? Because I bet you did not. And this is exactly why the prosecutor has fought this for so long. Possibly and allegedly, you did not have legal consent to obtain the DNA of all of these family members. And you are not wanting to release those names because, again, this would be a multi-million dollar lawsuit against the state of Idaho and possibly the FBI, allegedly. This is why it's being fought so hard in court. And even the judge has stepped in to say he will review all of this information first before he makes the decision on what evidence to provide to the defense. This is a great record to appeal if this Bryan Kohberger is convicted. But also, I see a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for what has happened. Was the DNA obtained legally? How was this family tree built? What is the chain of custody for this DNA, this touch DNA? Do you know how easy it is to leave touch DNA? You can go into a store. You can say, I would like to look at this item. Touch it. Oh, I don't want to buy it. And now your DNA is on it. You can touch a table. Someone else comes and touch the same table. And now your DNA is on them. This is why the prosecutor said, we're not even using this evidence. It's because you cannot. If you have one strong piece of evidence, and that is DNA on a knife sheath, and allegedly a knife was used to unalive the 4 victims, and the one strong piece of evidence that you obtained that can place potentially a person there because the touch DNA is on the sheath with the victim. If that's even true, correct? Was this on video camera? Because the strongest piece of evidence that you allegedly have is a knife sheath with touch DNA with the victim, and you're not using it. Why wouldn't you use it? I'm not a dummy. Why aren't you using that touch DNA with the knife sheath? What have you done? What have you done? If that evidence was obtained legally, was found as it has been reported in the PA of that officer, Brett Payne, and he says he saw it from standing in the doorway. He saw this knife sheath, and it's on the 3rd floor in one of the victims' rooms with the victims, between the 2 victims, and you're not using that, and that has his touch DNA. Well, I say, why the hell not? If you legally obtained his DNA and you built a profile that led to him, why aren't you using this DNA? There is something going on. This does not make sense. You cannot put him in that house while you're showing this continuous driving around for hours. It doesn't place him in the house. You don't have a way to put the knife in his hand. You don't have a witness that says Bryan Kohberger did it. You don't have video of him doing it. To my knowledge, you don't have a video of him walking into that house and walking out of that house. I've seen all kind of videos, but surely it wasn't of Mr. Bryan Kohberger. I've seen a video of 4 people going into the house. Now, is that true or was that another leak? Why aren't you using known evidence that has the alleged suspect DNA on it? On the 3rd floor, in between 2 of the victims. Do you have it on body cam for that police officer? How did they process that evidence? How did they obtain the family tree? How did they build the profile? Was it done legally or illegally? Because you're saying you're not even using that evidence. But guess what? The defense has a right to it. And they have a right to choose where they want to use it or not. Let's continue on. I'm going to repeat it one last time. The FBI uploaded that DNA profile onto public genetic databases according to the filing, then built a family tree of related people. The order shows the FBI also used social media, birth and death certificates, and other public information to build the family tree of people related to the unknown suspect profile. The IGG process pointed law enforcement toward defendant, but it did not provide law enforcement with substantive evidence of guilt. The filing said, of course it can. Of course it can. It's touch DNA. You need more than that. You still can't place him in the house. You can place him driving around. But you cannot place him in the house because touch DNA can be left at a, you don't know, there's no timing. And he didn't even have to touch it. It could have been somebody else that touched something that he touched. That's how easy it is. It's weak evidence. Weak evidence. Prosecutors have argued the FBI didn't directly compare the knife sheath DNA profile to Kohberger's DNA once he was identified as a suspect. And that the IGG will not be used at trial. Listen, people, does that make any sense? They have the DNA from the knife sheath. They identify Mr. Bryan Kohberger as a potential suspect. And they want to tell us they never compared the DNA that was found on the knife sheath to Mr. Kohberger's DNA. The FBI didn't. Once he was identified as a suspect. That makes no sense. You have a known sample of touch DNA on the knife sheath allegedly. Now you have identified a suspect. The first thing law enforcement wants to do is get a sample of the suspect's DNA to compare the two, to the known sample of touch DNA with the suspect's DNA and see if there's a match. They're saying the FBI didn't do it. This is an out for the FBI because it makes no sense. In every case over the last years, if you have a known sample of a suspect's DNA and then you find a suspect, the first thing you want to do, if you have to follow them and catch them throwing out a cigarette, spitting out gum, sipping on water or Pepsi or whatever. I'm sorry, not Pepsi, just a beverage. You're going to try to obtain their saliva so you can take that suspect's DNA and compare it to the known DNA that was left of that suspect. You want to know if they match. And you want me to believe that the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, had this touch DNA sample They had a suspect, and no one thought, covertly, we're going to obtain this DNA. Because guess what? Everybody has to drink. Sometimes people spit. You can go and get trash. You get a warrant. You go and you get the trash. He was a teacher's assistant, Mr. Kohberger. He had an office. He didn't have a trash can in that office. You know where he lives, right? You identify his apartment. You have someone surveil him. You wait until he throws out his trash. And you go and you collect that trash. And you take samples of his DNA and you compare it to the known touch DNA that allegedly was on the knife sheath. And you're telling me that law enforcement, the FBI, the top tier, with the best labs, with a level of technology, with expert scientists, could not do that? I don't believe you. I do not believe that. Let's read it one last time. Prosecutors have argued the FBI didn't directly compare the knife sheath DNA profile to Kohberger's DNA once he was identified as a suspect. And the IGG will not be used at trial. Well, why not? Why didn't they do it? Why aren't you using this evidence? It's getting worse for the prosecution. This looks like serious prosecutorial misconduct in high places at a high level. In my opinion, with what is being said and what is known. The defense is requesting all information on how investigators did the IGG testing. That is just one small part. We need to see the chain of custody from the beginning, from Brett Payne, from the moment he alleges he saw the knife sheath on that third floor. From the beginning, from inception. Where is your body cam footage? I want to see that chain of custody. During a lengthy August 18th hearing, several genealogy experts testified for the defense as to why this information may be pertinent to the case. Defense attorney Stephen Mercer, one such witness, said the defense must know how the tests were done, if the database searches complied with guidelines, and what decisions genetic researchers may have made during the investigation. What size was the DNA that was left? It was touch DNA. This is usually a very small amount of DNA. How many times was that touch DNA used? Was the sample depleted? The defense has argued it needs the material to know how the IGG profile was created and how many other people the FBI chose to ignore during their investigation. I'm not sure if they're referring to the other two samples of male DNA that was found at 1122 King Road. I don't know if those profiles were developed and if there were family trees built on them and how that was done. And maybe that's what they're referring to. I don't know. However, prosecutors have expressed concern about the possible public release of identities of family members from those materials, asking for protective orders. Again, what was the process? How did you do it? How did you build the family tree? What databases were you using? Was everything above board and legally done? Is this why you're choosing not to use this evidence? My guess, my opinion is it was not done legally. And there is a great lawsuit coming. And this is a form, an example of prosecutorial misconduct, and you're trying to hide it. Because you know what you did, and it wasn't legal, allegedly, in my opinion. I think that there's missing information from the Orthram profile we have, defense attorney Ann Taylor said Thursday. I hope the court gets it, and I certainly understand the court needs everything to make a decision. My hope is that everything includes communication so you can follow the path of what happened. Prosecutor Bill Thompson voiced concern the defense has false assumptions about what evidence there is and said some of the information the defense is going off of may be inaccurate. There are items she thinks ought to be there that do not exist, Thompson said of Taylor. I don't think the lawyers should get into this guessing game of what should and shouldn't be there, particularly since it's our position the defense has a fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between S&P profiles and traditional DNA comparisons and how that process works. That doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. She's going to use an expert. The defense attorney, Ann Taylor, she can have a misunderstanding all day long. She's not testifying. She's not reviewing this evidence. She's sending it to experts. These are experts in their field of DNA, genetic testing, genetic databases, building a profile. She doesn't have to know everything about DNA. She's going to hire experts to review that evidence, the information, how it was processed, how it was received, what was done. Because there are standards. There's ways that you can make a mistake. Thompson said his team was not accusing the defense of being intentionally misleading, but that their misunderstandings may confuse the court. We are not trying to mislead the court. We've been absolutely clear and relied on Department of Justice policy and our expectations, Taylor said. Judge said he'd see what the FBI provided. I understand the FBI may have some notes. Let's start with what we know is there and we can go from there, he said. Thompson advised he'd already been in contact with the FBI about the order and submitted a formal request, but warned he'd been told it could take a month to get the documents as the request had to go through the bureaucracy of the Department of Justice. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to read just the introduction and the order and the conclusion. Because if you want to read all 32 pages to gain the background of what we've already discussed throughout videos, what's been in the news, in the media, what's been reported, what's in some of the other motions, you can go for it. But we're going to stick to just the introduction and then the conclusion. And this will sum it all up for us in this order. On November 13th, 2022, four University of Idaho students were found murdered. As part of law enforcement's investigation into the homicide, the FBI employed the use of investigative genetic genealogy using DNA located on a K-bar knife sheath found at the crime scene. Through the IGG process, the FBI constructed a family tree of individuals whose DNA matched with the DNA found on the knife sheath. The FBI then sent law enforcement a tip to investigate defendant Bryan Kohberger. Kohberger was arrested on December 30th, 2022, and charged with 4 counts of murder in the first degree and 1 count of burglary. Nothing about law enforcement's use of IGG was used to obtain the arrest warrant for Kohberger or to obtain the search warrant for his DNA. Put in how did you get to that point? You were looking for a white Elantra. You said it was a set number of years, the model. Then you changed that to match his vehicle. Right? You said the murders happened between 2 and 3, and you changed that to match a time where he had been driving through this area allegedly of 1122 King Road. Right? How was he identified at all if this tip from the FBI relating to the knife sheath touch DNA? How was Bryan Kohberger identified? You didn't have the right model. You didn't have allegedly the right time of the murder. You changed it. How was he identified? Law enforcement. If you didn't use the tip. And we need dates, right? We don't need to know the day he was arrested. We know that. What dates did things happen? We need details. We need specifics. When was the knife sheath touch DNA provided to the FBI? When did the FBI process it? When did the results come in from that processing? How long did it take them to build the family tree? What was that process like? Because we already know you use public databases. When was Bryan Kohberger's name provided to law enforcement? When? A date. You're saying he was not used. You're saying that the touch DNA, the tip was not used. Bryan Kohberger's name was not used. And you're not going to use this touch DNA. So how did his name come about? Let's keep going. The state has now filed a motion to prevent the disclosure of the IGG information to the defense. So the state has now filed a motion to prevent the disclosure of the IGG information to the defense. And this is the only piece of evidence that would potentially, you could say, would put his DNA on the knife sheath between the two victims on the 3rd floor. You're not using the information, but also defense, you can't use it either, right? You're going to file a motion to prevent having to disclose this information to you. This is deep, y'all. This is deep. The defense opposes the motion and filed a motion to compel requesting discovery of everything pertaining to the IGG investigation, including the family tree built by the FBI. You need to go a step further. You want the evidence from inception when Brett Payne said he saw it. You want the body cam. You want the chain of custody. You need that. You need it. Does it exist? Disclosure of information gathered from an IGG investigation is an issue of first impression in Idaho. The state claims that the IGG information was not used to obtain any warrant and will not be used at trial. But was it used in the grand jury process for the indictment of Bryan Kohberger? Was it used? For the reasons set forth below, the court finds that the defense is likely entitled to see at least some of the information from the IGG investigation, even if it may ultimately be found to have no relevance to Kohberger's defense. However, because the court has not seen exactly what information pertaining to the use of IGG is available, the court cannot say precisely what should and what should not be disclosed at this time. Because of this uncertainty, the court grants the state's request for an in-camera review, that's private, of the IGG information. After such review, the court will enter the appropriate discovery and protective orders. Bryan Kohberger's family. Bryan Kohberger's family. Bryan Kohberger's family. You need to get you an attorney. It appears that possibly you have not consented to your DNA being used for law enforcement purposes and for the protection of what has happened, allegedly. It's going to be in camera, it's going to be private, it's going to be sealed, and an order will not release what they have done. Get you an attorney. Quickly. Let's go to the conclusion. We're not going to read 30 pages of this. We're going to go straight to the end. It's about a paragraph, 2 paragraphs. Conclusion. For the reasons articulated above, and those 30 pages above, the court finds that Kohberger has made the requisite showing that at least some of the sought-after evidence, 1, is material to the preparation of the defense, 2, encompasses results or reports of scientific tests or experiments made in connection with the case, 3, may include reports and memoranda that were made by a police officer or investigator in connection with the investigation, and 4, may be of substantial need in the preparation of the defendant's case. However, the court understands the state concerns with the identities of unknown relatives being made public and acknowledges the need for the issuance of protective orders. The state's argument that the IGG investigation is wholly irrelevant since it was not used in obtaining any warrants and will not be used at trial is well supported. I totally disagree. I completely disagree. Nonetheless, Kohberger is entitled to view at least some of the IGG information in preparing his defense, even if it may ultimately be found to be irrelevant. In balancing these interests, the court will conduct an in-camera review of all the IGG information in the possession, custody, or control of the state, including the FBI, to determine precisely what needs to be disclosed and what does not need to be disclosed, and issue any protective orders necessary. So ordered. October 25th, 2023. People, good people, tell me what you think. What do you think? What about Bryan Kohberger's rights? He has rights, right? Due process, right to confront any accusers. He has a right to take the stand. He has a right not to take the stand. Right? I think if the prosecutor continues on this path, it is not going to be good. It's actually getting worse. It's hard to create, to manufacture, and I'm going to say allegedly evidence in a case where you want to find the killer or killers. What are you doing? Are you following the leads? Are you pursuing what is standing out? Are you looking at all potential suspects? Are you reviewing all of the known evidence? Are you sitting down and interviewing witnesses? Are you going through all of the surveillance evidence, videos? Did you review where the victims were that day? Did you review where the two alive roommates were that day? Did you review all of the cell phone activity for all of the victims and the two alive roommates? Did you look at social media? Did you look at the days and weeks leading up to the murders? Did you compare this Idaho 4 murder to other murders in the last 5 years? Was there any killers recently released from prison at the time that these murders happened? What about ex offenders? Was there anybody released? Because there's all kind of reports that people were standing outside of the house, they were in masks. Was that unfounded? Was that not true? What about the reports where someone was inside of one of the sorority houses? There was a man in black, and the police came and looked for him and they couldn't find him. Is that true? Were you ever able to find that suspect that was inside the sorority house? Have you looked at patterns? Was there any surveillance review in the days leading up to the murders? Surveillance around the house. Around 1122 King Road, but in the community. I implore the Idaho community to please take a second look at this case. I don't want to be on here dismantling this case. The lack of evidence, how this case is going. We're all looking at Bryan Kohberger as the potential suspect killer of these four victims. But is it likely? Is it possible that he did this? Or is there someone else? Is there others? What is the truth? What about the stalker? Was that filtered through and investigated properly and thoroughly? I don't want to put other names out there of their behaviors and things that they were doing, how they harmed animals. What about the alleged fight that Ethan had the night of the murders, that Saturday, that confrontation? Is it true? I get these messages, and people literally tell me that everyone in this community knows the truth. They know that Bryan Kohberger is not the suspect, is not the assailant, is not the killer of these four people. I get these messages, I get comments in my videos. If you care, if you can have empathy, if you can understand what has happened to these four people and their families, they were brutally, viciously attacked. Someone or several people were involved in their murders. Their killer or killers, they're getting away. They're getting away with this. Because while everyone's focused on the prosecution of Bryan Kohberger, they may not even be in this community anymore. They can be in another state, they can be out of the country by now, not even being considered a suspect, let alone evidence being built, a case being built to prove it. You don't want this to happen to your loved one, your child. And if it did, you want to know why. And you want to know who did this to them. In a vicious murder, you're going to have substantial blood, DNA, footprints, handprints. You're going to have footprints up and down those steps, in the house, outside. You're surely not going to be able to tell me that 4 people stabbed brutally. You couldn't hear those screams. You couldn't hear furniture falling, thuds, as they're being unalived. In the early morning hours. You're going to have more than one footprint. If you know the truth and you know what happened and you know who was involved, why don't you do the right thing? Not only is Bryan Kohberger's life destroyed as he knew it as a person, as someone that also had hopes and dreams and was trying to come into the world and build a career, his family, they picked apart everything in his life, every bad thing that happened to him. When he had difficulty, when he was down, when he had whatever drug issues he was not a perfect person. And he had challenges and problems, just like anybody else. But did he do this? I go back to the pictures, the media, with not even a scratch. We need to tell the truth. And we need to start working on who unalived, who brutally went into this home, took whatever time they needed. Nobody called the police, not even when the people came at allegedly 8 a.m. Nobody called the police. It had been hours. Not one. The medical examiner slash coroner, because really she's a coroner, she admittedly came to the scene 5 to 5.5 hours later. And the 2 roommates that allegedly were in the house unharmed, what do you have to say? What do you know to be true? Zayna and Ethan, Kaylee and Maddie together, each in a room. One on the second floor, another set on the third floor. In the early morning of November 13th, at home, up late, in the bedroom, not knowing, totally and completely unprepared, possibly laying down or even just browsing on the phone on social media, and someone comes in to this home, a 3-story home near a college campus, in the dark, with allegedly a knife. With law enforcement just mere feet away, actively stopping people, interviewing them, questioning them, patrolling in this community on a Saturday going into Sunday morning. And someone enters this house, violates the norm of community, of being at home, possibly in bed, and you're vitally attacked and unalive, with no real chance because you cannot really fight back with a knife. Kaylee and Maddie being so petite, so tiny, really no chance against what I feel was a possible male actor or more than one actor, not against a knife. One roommate being wedged between her best friend and me. Can't even get up. Stabbed, screaming, yelling, kicking, fighting, scratching. One victim being stabbed 52 times allegedly. On the third floor. So now this person has to come down to the second floor, believing that whatever happened on the third floor, possibly, the roommates on the second floor could possibly hear the commotion, the screams, the dog, Murphy, barking. And the couple being in Zayna's room, possibly laying down or just returning from grabbing the food delivery or possibly eating the food, also attacked. Now they're on the second floor. Brett Payne says that when he came upon the second floor, he could see a female, which later is identified as Zaina. But we also heard that Ethan's body was against the door. So Ethan was on the ground. But I believe initially Ethan was laying down on the bed from what I saw from the blood on the mattress. I think he got up when the attack began. Or if Zaina was attacked first, because again, she could be seen from Brett Payne coming onto the second floor. She was already visibly seen, so her body may have been in the hallway or in the doorway of her room. Again, violently attacked, brutally stabbed, both her and a roommate from the home also being on the second floor, just mere feet away. Did not call 911. During the stabbings on the third floor, or when the killer or killers came to the second floor. Could hear crying, so you could not hear screams. You could not hear the commotion, the struggle, the fight, the battle, and you never called 911. Even seeing someone, hearing their voice, and as she said, he walked past her. He still did not call 911. At some point, you called others over. You were the other women from the first floor, but you did not call 911 for help, for an ambulance, for emergency services. Hours, hours had passed, even with the people allegedly coming at 8 a.m. Additional hours had passed. What were all of these people doing all of these hours? Besides tainting the crime scene with their fingerprints or shoe impressions, possibly moving potential evidence, removing evidence, possibly moving victims. We don't know. We have no idea. That is a lot of time. Was there a cleanup? What were these other college students doing at the house all this time? If they were there and there were reports that that front door was open as early as 8 a.m., so it's light outside now. Do we have the video surveillance from the house across the street that shows what time people started coming over? What time was that? How many people? Where did they come? Did they pull up in a car or did they walk across the street? Who were they? What were they doing? Did they remove anything from the house? Any evidence? What was the surveillance like? What was on that video? How many people? Were they male? Were they female? Were they sorority and fraternity friends? Who were they? Why were they there and what did they do? And why did it take additional hours to call 911? What were they doing all that time? Where were they in the house? What were they doing at the crime scene? What were the roommates doing all those hours? Was there any tests done to see if bleach was used? Ammonia to destroy DNA? Was the washing machine checked to see if there was any washes going? Any blood in the washing machine? I don't need the answer. I'm going to go about my day as normal. With Katie, Maddie, Zayna, and Ethan, their families, their loved ones, their parents, their siblings. They need those answers. They're hurting. They're trying to figure it out. So day by day, sometimes it gets hard. And many people just don't understand what you go through when you're in school and you don't have the answers. And you have someone that's arrested, but in all honesty, it doesn't look like Mr. Kohberger is either the assailant at all or the only assailant. There's more questions than answers. We'll do this today. It seems more personal, like somebody they would know. If you tell me a person has been stabbed in a upwards of more than 3 times, let alone 52 allegedly, this is personal. There's a lot of anger there. I would believe that person would have a violent background. Probably started with harming animals, started young in their childhood, and there were signs, maybe even ignored signs. This person was prone to violence, very angry, short tempered, possibly harming different animals, and maybe even being violent towards women. Strong, tall, college age, because he's on a college campus and he felt comfortable. And I also feel like he knew the victims, been around them, been in the house before. Because the layout of the house is crazy. It's wild. It's strange. It could be described as, someone going in there, maybe even getting lost in a turnaround. But if you know the property and you've been in the property, it may not be so hard to go in there in the dark at night. Because you already know your way around. You may have even planned how you were going to get in the house, being there a different time, unlocking a window, you know which doors work. You may even know the passcodes to the rooms, to the front door. You have to consider all of these things in hopes of getting information, evidence to find, to lead to the killer or killers. So, with all of this being said, if you don't mind, I know it's not a way for you to stay anonymous. If you don't mind, please let me know in the comments your thoughts. Your thoughts could be, I think he did it. I don't think he did it. I think he did it with someone else, for example. Or you can even let me know who you think did it. I have some thoughts, but I would not share those without evidence. That would be wrong of me to lead you down a path with no evidence. Because I know this person needs the opportunity to do it. They need the opportunity. They need to know what the victims are doing. Not just knowing that going in very late, they're going to be possibly sleeping, but they need to know that they were there. Was there an intended target? Because that was something that we were told in the beginning, that this was a targeted attack and that one of the roommates was possibly targeted. Okay, well, which one? That's where the idea of the stalker was very interesting to me. And I wanted to know more about that, more instances. And I did look into it a little bit. And I watched some videos where someone from the restaurant said that they were trying to protect one of the girls, be with her, be supportive, do things with her because of the stalker. So one of the families, they were saying that they heard of, their child having a stalker. They didn't know a lot about it, but she thought she had a stalker. I don't know if she ever filed a police report or called 911, but there's been a lot of information coming about someone being outside of the house in all black. And then I know of the report myself because I watched the police body cam of the police searching for a man that was in one of the sorority houses. They could not find him. They searched every inch of the house, but they couldn't find him. By the time the police arrived, he was not there anymore. They couldn't find him. So, do we have a serial killer possibly? That's why I want to go back 5 years, look at prior cases, look at other victims, look at any reports of an animal being harmed, any reports of any stalking, somebody being outside the house. We know on this campus there's been a lot of reports. I think those reports should be reviewed. I don't think this was the first time. I think some more interviews is needed. And I'm glad the house was not torn down. I saw recently that allegedly the FBI returned back to the property. I'm not sure if that was to collect more evidence or um, I know they were doing a scan of the property. To me, that should have happened 11 months ago, 10 months ago. You really want to preserve the crime scene. You could do the video scan so it can be reproduced. That's very important, especially because the layout of the house is not a typical layout. And that would help the jury if this goes to trial with Bryan Kohberger. So I'm really, really hoping that there's going to be some additional investigating. I don't know if a warrant is something that can be um, offered for additional evidence on suspects, but that may help. You might have to go to jailhouse snitches, see if there's anything there, if there's any talk um, of what happened in Idaho for another case. I was I was reading about 3 weeks ago, and I heard that Ethan's family created a scholarship, and it was through the fraternity. And I read that part of money that Ethan had in his bank account was turned over to the scholarship. So his own funds helped seed the scholarship, and the first scholarship was awarded to his brother. And I was going to do a whole video about that. I had already previously read about where Ethan used to work. They created a tulip, a special tulip in his memory. And there was, I believe, they called it Ethan's Smile. And sometimes you just don't have adequate words to express the condolences. You just don't. Just words are not enough. I would like for people to take all of their energy, their thoughts, sending love and light to the families, but also reinvigorating this case to go back and look at possible suspects. We have lost so much time, but I believe it is wholly worth it so that we can get justice for these 4 victims. That's all I got today. Thank you for checking out this video. I hope that you check out some of my other videos. I need you, I want you, I implore you, please stay safe, be smart, stay savvy. Okay, friends? Please take care, be well. Enjoy your Sunday afternoon. I wish you the best, and I will see you soon in a future video. Be well, all my friends. Take care, and I will see you in a video soon. Bye, my friends.